Okay, the time is 6:05, and we'll go ahead and call our City Council briefing session to order. This is the 18th day of August of 2020, and again, timestamp is 6:05. There's Mark. There you are. Okay, coming to order for our briefing session, and just want to cover the normal things that we have in terms of housekeeping, that in accordance with an order of the Office of the Governor issued March 16, 2020, is extended by the Office of the Governor on June 12, 2020. City Council for the City of Duncanville will conduct City Council regular meetings by video conference, and we're starting at 6 p.m. today, Tuesday, August 18th, and in order to advance public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings, also called social distancing, in an effort to slow the spread of coronavirus pandemic. This is an open meeting being conducted by video conference. There's no public access to the physical building. And so when we get to actually calling the meeting to order, I will read the information in terms of individuals who wish to speak publicly and live, which is the first for us for this particular week. So a recording of the video meeting will be available to the public in accordance with the Open Meetings Act upon written request. We are in audiences in listen only mode, and citizens who are registered to speak have to do so by 4 p.m. And there's one individual who has asked to do that, and I do have one written comment. Each council member must use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the page on Zoom, or physically raise your hand like so. And Kristen, our city secretary, will help me see that happening and let me know that I need to be calling on you. Votes will be by roll call, as we have done in the past. Okay, moving on into our work session. The first thing that we have is for our city manager, Mr. Fredrickson, to go through the agenda items. Mr. Fredrickson.
Okay, Mayor and members of council, on your consent agenda, you have 3 items. The first item is the consideration of minutes from your July 21st meeting, also from your board and commission interview meetings held July 27th and July 28th. Item B is a resolution to enter into a joint election agreement with the election services between Duncanville and Dallas County. What is unique in this instance is that Dallas County will be having shared election voting, or what they're calling countywide vote centers throughout Dallas County. This is also helping in reducing the cost of the election that will be passed on to all the jurisdictions taking part in that election. Obviously, too, it'll be in conjunction with a presidential election, so those costs have come down considerably. So this will be an agreement between the city of Duncanville and Dallas County for those services. And then item C on the consent agenda is consider resolution authorizing purchase from Vermeer, Texas, Louisiana, for a vac trailer, 500-gallon vac trailer. Our current vac trailer is aged. It was purchased in 2005. The vac trailer is used for stormwater cleanup and also for smaller sewer line cleanouts as well. Extremely important feature of our fleet for utility. And again, it was council budgeted $75,000 for this purchase, and purchased at $57,000. Mayor, that's it for the consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fredrickson. Moving on to item number 2, briefings and presentations. The first one we have is briefing the City Council on food trucks. And this is with Mr. Ramey, our Director of Public Works. Mr. Ramey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, we're talking about food trucks. Next slide, please. So again, we're asking Council to consider development and implementation of a food truck ordinance for the city of Duncanville. The food truck ordinance would be consistent with the council strategic pillars that were established by council in October of 2019. with those 3 pillars that you see here: Main Street, reimagining Main Street, innovative ideas, and marketing the city. Next slide, please. Again, the briefing in this ordinance is pertaining only to certified food trucks and trailers where food is cooked and served. So we're talking about the truck and the trailer that you see in the top picture. It does not include mobile food vending, which serves prepackaged food. So we're looking at the little job site snack truck and the hot dog truck trailer. Those are currently not allowed in Duncanville. Ice cream trucks are allowed, but those to operate in neighborhoods require a peddler's permit from PD. So those are already permitted, but through the police department. Next slide, please. So we do believe that regulation and permitting of the food trucks is necessary within the city. The bottom line is we just want to make sure that people don't get sick from eating at a food truck, and we also want to make sure that the food trucks are safe and they don't catch on fire. You know, they're cooking, they've got propane stoves, they've got generators with fuel, and we want to make sure that it's a safe environment for the public. We do currently only allow food truck permits for special events, and what we're looking for those and what we recommend, you know, if we had a food truck ordinance would include, we're looking for an approved commissary or fixed food service location. Basically, we want to make sure that the food truck operator is getting food from a location that also practices good hygiene, is sanitary, has good refrigeration. You know, we don't want necessarily food trucks where the food just prepared in, you know, in the backyard per se. There's a health inspection to make sure that the proper sanitation is present in the food truck. We got hot water, sinks, place to refrigerate the food, make sure it's clean, and that the people that are in the food trailer have the certifications on food handling. Again, making sure that the public is getting food that is safe to eat. And then the fire inspection involves the range hood, propane lines, generator, and that the vehicle itself is safe and has its appropriate inspection. The range hoods are a critical component to any of the food trucks or trailers. That's the primary fire suppression system is built into that range hood, and so that's the very critical. It's actually something that is a 6-month inspection. We want to make sure that those are safe. Next slide, please. So again, the Duncanville ordinance currently is silent on food trucks. We only allow them to operate in the city as part of a special event, which is issued through Parks and Rec, fixed location, limited duration, limited number of food trucks. So think about like the food trucks that we set up, we're allowed to operate during like our 4th of July celebrations or at Christmas. They're just allowed to operate over at Armstrong Park. And when the event is over, they leave, and that's the end of that. But the driving factor, again, is we've had some of our commercial industrial businesses are requesting food trucks to serve their employees. We've actually had owners and operators of food trucks have contacted the city and the health inspector about operating in the city. So their food trucks want to serve, be in Duncanville. We've had entrepreneurs come to the city and express an interest in establishing food truck parks in the city. I've had 2 separate discussions with entrepreneurs trying to have that idea in the city. The food trucks are operating in the city currently without permits, and when we see them operating and driving around Duncanville, the fire inspector and the code officers go up and tell them that they're not permitted to operate in Duncanville right now. the health inspector has gone out, and during her normal inspections, when something like this has come up, she's expressed to me that some of the Duncanville restaurant owners have some concerns about food trucks. Food trucks are subject to paying sales tax for sales made in Duncanville. That was clarified through Jessica's sales tax consultant. Next slide, please. So just looking at the surrounding cities, again, Duncanville's up at the top, and you'll see the Best Southwest, and then some of the other cities in the area. Everybody is, allows short-term special event type food trucks, but when you're looking at the long-term food trucks operating out of food truck parks or other locations, only DeSoto, Arlington, Mesquite, and Denton have those. So again, within the Best Southwest, DeSoto has a standalone ordinance regarding their food trucks. They allow them in private parking lots, like the Grow DeSoto Marketplace. And then with a written agreement, they're allowed to operate in parks and public facilities. In Arlington, they allow it through the zoning ordinance, and in non-residential and mixed-use districts, but they've got to have active brick and mortar bars or theater. So it's sort of, they're looking for a total entertainment, food and entertainment package. Mesquite, they have a standalone ordinance, again, not residential areas. Again, in conjunction with active brick and mortar businesses, but they specify a standoff from the brick and mortar of 100 feet. And they can request to operate off public property, but they have to get permission. And then in Denton, it's permitted in the zoning ordinance. The food courts, mobile food courts, food truck parks, whatever you want to call them, are allowed by SUP in non-residential and mixed use. And they require a health permit and a business permit. Next slide, please. So again, just some more food for thought. Again, the food trucks in 2020 is, what I was saying is not your mother's idea of a food truck. And I know my previous experience, when I was younger, was more of the food vending machines, food vending trucks, where they roll up and they've already got a bunch of prepackaged sandwiches. But today it's an outlet of what you find in a lot of places, an outlet of creativity by food truck operators. It's an innovative and growing industry. People are coming in with new ideas of different menus and different food options. We're finding it promotes entrepreneurship and increasing jobs and businesses. It increases food options, and it enhances the areas and vitality and placemaking. And I like to just call your attention. This is a food truck park down in Austin. So we're seeing a lot of, again, positive results from having an active food truck program in other cities. Next slide, please. And wow. Finally, for turning over to council for discussion and feedback, that picture really turned out poorly, but what I was trying to capture in that picture was Clyde Warren Park there in downtown Dallas, where they have the park, and then it's flanked by a bunch of food trucks where they have some utility pedestals, and there's picnic opportunities, and just showing how food trucks can be an enhancement to an area. Wow. So the first thing, just for council's discussion and feedback, is looking for input from council about food trucks, does council want to operate or have food trucks to operate in the city beyond just special events? I'll turn that over to the mayor for discussion purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Ramey. Really appreciate that. And also I want to commend you and your staff for bringing this to our attention, to putting it on the agenda for us to consider, because food trucks definitely are something that is necessary. I think, my personal opinion, for our city is they are not just a trend, it is a new extension of being able to provide consumable food prepared well, from everything that I've seen for our citizens and people that are just driving by, is for impulse. Some of the things that I've seen, I've personally witnessed the food trucks assembled at Clyde Warren Park, and the variety and the quality of food is just fabulous. And if we were able to bring something like that to our city, I believe it would be great, to our great benefit. I do have a couple of questions for you and or our health inspector. And if you go back to that one slide that showed the Austin, well, you don't have to. Just thinking about that slide on the Austin, it ties into a question that I had when I was reading through what we're going to be talking about tonight. And that is a requirement for an improved surface. There could be some private property within our city that may or may not have a concrete pad. And I know that we have some ordinances in terms of parking vehicles, and it has to be on an improved surface. And if I'm not mistaken, our code does not permit it, or does not qualify an improved surface like crushed granite or crushed caliche or heavy stone. An improved surface has to be 4 inches of concrete with rebar, and so on and so on and so on. So looking at this particular shot in Austin, we may have an opportunity here in our city to have a number of food trucks, but not on an improved surface in accordance with current ordinances. So Greg, when we look through this, I would ask that, not looking for an answer tonight, but just some consideration for the possibility of bringing food trucks into a location that would not have that, would not be a concrete pad. What I have in the back of my mind is the Hanging Garden, the old Hanging Gardens location at the corner of Main and Danieldale. Some of that, excuse me, some of that is concrete with the foundation of the old home itself, but a lot of that space is not improved. It could be, to my opinion, a great place for a food truck park on an intermittent basis. That, of course, is privately owned, and that would be in cooperation with the property owner. So just putting that on the table for some thought and consideration. Second thing is a question for our health inspector, Tammy. Are food handlers certificates required by anything, I guess, for individuals that are preparing and making food in these food trucks, or does the health certificate, quote unquote, cover that? How does that work, Tammy?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tammy Isle. I'm the health inspector. Well, the state of Texas mandates that a food manager certification is obtained, as well as food handler certifications for the rest of the staff that's going to be handling or working with food. So manager certification is required, and anyone outside the manager that's going to be preparing or handling food has to have a food handler certification.
So where are those issued from? From the county, or we wouldn't have to be making those issuances ourselves, would we? Or would you have to do that?
Well, some cities do offer those classes. I think DeSoto has one, the city of Dallas, city of Fort Worth, but there's also online. You can obtain it online.
For us, typically right now, Mayor, is we just, it's an inspectable item, and it's up to them to get their training through online or other sources.
Okay. One other question, then I'll open it up to the rest of the council. Sorry for taking up time, but just this is of great interest to me. Going back to that one slide, I guess it was in chart 4 where you showed the examples, Greg, and you did mention the ice cream truck as what, a peddler, I guess, interestingly. So what we'd be looking at too is to permit an ice cream truck to be part of this ordinance, to be where an ice cream truck could be included in a food truck park location. Am I correct in thinking that?
Well, I think what it would boil down to with the ice cream truck, and I think a lot of the intent with the peddler's permit was for them to operate in neighborhoods and a soliciting kind of, but then it goes back to the prepackaged food. So what more along the lines, what I would think would be appropriate, and maybe Andrew, you can talk to it as well, but what I'm thinking is more appropriate for like a food truck park situation, special event situation, isn't someone who hands out a pre-wrapped ice cream sandwich, but what is it? The snow cone folks that they actually make the snow cones, like was it Kona Ice, those kind of ideas. Or like I've been to Clyde Warren and they've got somebody there who makes like gourmet ice cream and they hand out ice cream by the scoop and they do the and whatever else. And again, if as part of our ordinance, if council wanted something where again you would do like the Nutty Buddy or a ice cream sandwich and you thought that was also acceptable, we certainly can write the ordinance accordingly, but I was envisioning more of the lab where they're bringing in and the assembly is, and prepared on site and stuff like that. Again, more of a Kona ice model or somewhere like where they're serving the ice cream more by the scoop and things like that.
Okay, and I have another question, and I know we have some inputs from our other city council members. Sometimes I see individuals with a pickup truck and they're pulling a big smoker, like a 6 or 8 foot smoker. What's your thoughts on those?
The problem with just someone pulling a smoker and this pulling up behind is that there's no fire suppression. So again, what you're seeing, if you look at these 2 pictures that are still up, those big old silver things at the top, that's all tied to the big fire, the branch hood and the integrated safety stuff like that. So what I've seen more, there was a food truck, from my experience personally, that again, I envisioned, that used to operate on the base at Grand Prairie, the reserve base. He had a smoker. He towed a smoker and did his cooking in the smoker, but then he brought the food into the food truck to do all the preparation and the serving and everything else. And so, that's sort of what I would say is that they've got to incorporate both, because what's missing on just the truck pulling a cooker trailer is the sinks to ensure sanitation. Where's the refrigeration? Where's the fire suppression? Those are the big flags to me, just off the top of my head, and why that would be, how that differs from something here. And again, you see a lot of the smokers. Shoot, that barbecue place across on Cockrell Hill in Dallas. They got the smoker out in the parking lot, but they still bring it into and serve it out of their store.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a great idea. Thanks for bringing it to us. Ms. Jameson, I see that you wanted to make some comments.
Yes, I was curious about on one of the slides you had about that the restaurants in town had expressed. I don't know if you could go back to the slide.
There we go. Back one. I think it's 6 or 5. One more slide, please.
There you go.
So I know what, Tammy, maybe you can sort of help me but what she relayed to me was a lot of folks on the restaurant side, and this is sort of where council's got to, use their weigh the options and the judgment, but what they're saying is that, hey, I'm investing in a brick and mortar, there's more startup costs, and those kind of issues like, hey, I have a restaurant, I've got startup costs, property taxes. So they're looking at it as a competition between restaurants and food trucks and maybe an unfair advantage. Tammy, I know you're the one that said if you had those conversations.
Yes,
Can you expand on that?
that is correct. I've had several restaurant owners express that concern to me. They stated that if they had to pay overhead cost and rent, and that they feel that food trucks should too as well, and they didn't want them. They don't want them. One owner actually wanted to know when we were going to have a meeting because he wanted to show up and express his concerns. Wasn't happy at all.
Tammy, in those discussions, was it an objection even on an intermittent basis or an objection to, permanent, which we wouldn't have? What was the tenor of some of those conversations?
They don't want them.
Period.
Competition, I believe, basically competition.
Okay. Any other comments from city council members? Yeah, Mr. Cooks.
Oh no, I didn't have anything, but I will go ahead and add to it now. Competition is out there, and I think that's one of the great ways of America that we have the right to compete. And I really like it that, number one, that it gives them an opportunity to see if they want it brick or mortar, if it's going to hold up or not. But I do have a question from Rainey, and that is fee structure. Are you going to talk about that later at some point? If it's passed, do we charge them for any, is there any fees charged to the food truck if they're set up? Is it a permanent basis? Is it a temporary? Tell me what's your initial thought when you looked at this.
Okay. For the person operating the slides, can you go back one slide to the discussion questions slide? So yeah, we were asked, slide 8. So one of the things we were wanting input from council is, again, what you're looking for, but the things that I was thinking about was the same fee. My thoughts would be they would have to pay for CO. They would have to pay for a health inspection permit, the same as a restaurant. They still got to have a CO. They still got to have a health inspection for those. But I would make it a 6-month permit versus a year permit, because it's, again, those fancy range hoods that they have are permits. That inspection is only good for 6 months. So from a permitting level, which would, again, I guess would cover the city's cost to have Tammy and the fire marshal go out there and do inspections, and then for the staff to manage the permits, having just a normal CO and would cover those costs. Depending on where you put them, if public property, like at a park was something, we could always look at charging a rental fee for their opportunity. You want to go and set up a food truck at Alexander Park. Well, that's fine. It's going to be, X amount of dollars. They're paying sales tax while we're here. The issue where I think I would need the most guidance and I would feel out of place specifying it is understanding city's council is again on the competition. How much of a leveling of a playing field do you see as necessary? I really can't speak to that because any other fees might be tied to above that, which we can have whatever we want, but I don't know where you're going, or I need feedback from what you're trying to, what you would be trying to accomplish with the fee. If it's just covering the costs, we have that now. If it's some other stuff to, for opportunities to do it, that's fine, but I don't know what we want to use as our metric to help us measure, level it out if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and answer my portion of it. I'll answer now that I would like to see fixed locations. Also, when you talk about fixed location, I'd also like to know that they are being measured food quality wise, like a restaurant, whether I think we're using numbers versus lettering. So I'd like to know that is still the same for the food truck that it was for the restaurant. I think we're using what, the 80, 90, 75 type deal, same thing there. But fixed location is probably important to me. And then having a location where it's a partnering with a parking lot, such as maybe the Minier Food Store, the old Minier Food Store location, or as the mayor mentioned, the Hanging Garden, those types of deals versus just anywhere around the city. But I did want, when you talk about pricing, I know you'll get to that later, you mentioned, but it would caution us not to price ourselves out of the market if all the other cities has the same thing, that our stipulation is so stiff that we passed the ordinance, but everyone, all the other cities versus us, because we have so much set up differently than the other cities. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Any additional input?
Can I ask a question about, can you back to slide 8, please? Council's regarding, what if people wanted to set up in a park and serve food trucks out of a park? Is that something that interests council? Harrington Park, Armstrong Park, Alexander Park, Lakeside Park. In those cases, I'm thinking, hey, you're going to be using, and we can set a rental fee. I think that's appropriate with, the guidance about looking what our peers are doing. But, in those cases, they'd be taking up a parking spot or so in the parking lot. We're definitely providing them a restroom facility, which would be good, which makes it extra nice that they can piggyback off of when they're using a city park. But what are your thoughts about allowing them to set up in a public park, public property, like a park?
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett has his hand raised too.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add my comment is that, yes, I would be a proponent to allow food trucks to operate in the city beyond special events. I tend to agree with Councilman Cooks that there need to be designated areas. And regarding Greg Ramey's questions, regarding a park, I would have no problem with that, and also develop a rental fee. But also want to keep in mind, if Harrington has concession stands, is that I probably wouldn't be in as big a favor to have that competition from the concession stands. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Veracruz has his hand up.
Go ahead, Joe.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm the same way. Basically, yes on the food trucks. I do like the fixed location. I would also like to keep the special event part of it, in that if we have our big 4th of July or Christmas or something, we could add trucks if we decide to limit them in the first place. And then of course, again, the parks, my question would be what days and what time of the day So would it just be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 8 to 5, or, you know, so that's my question, but thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Anderson, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've been operating these food trailers for a long time. First down on Fort Worth Avenue. Today I operate the 3 at Grow DeSoto Marketplace. There's 3 out there. I operate 3 at Tyler Station in Oak Cliff too. So I've got really firsthand experience in these and like the problems with them, the good and the bad. And so one of the first things that I was going to say is that there's places like Bentonville, Arkansas, where they put them all over their downtowns and they attach them to buildings. That's why you're seeing some of these ordinances where they're attached to buildings, because they can easily plug into a building. If they have a deal with a landlord, you know, they can easily plug into a building and get water. Then you don't have real loud operating generators that are kind of irritating. And another thing that can happen there is they can use the restrooms inside the building. So at Grow DeSoto Marketplace, see, we have the building is open, so you can go into the building and use the restrooms. You can use porta potties, but they're a little more difficult to use. The other thing is like sewer dumping and things like that is you have to deal with, you know, what happens with that when they have to pull them in and out. Then and the electric and water, and those are some of the infrastructure things. I think that one of the problems, like the food trucks over on Greenville Avenue that went in a few years ago, the city of Dallas made them put in concrete pads. They made them put in sewer. They made them put in like all kinds of infrastructure, which they could have built a building just as easy. And the beauty of food trailers, I like food trailers more than I do trucks because I like a little more permanent, like Councilmember Cooks talked about, more permanent. But the good thing about these, if you don't make the landlord, or you don't make them put in a bunch of infrastructure, they truly are temporary buildings. And that being said, I would like to see them placed in places that actually enhance the buildings around them, like on Main Street or even on Wheatland, like at the old Minyard Center, or one of those places where they're in the parking lot and they're enhancing the, you know, they're bright, they've got some twinkly lights, they're enhancing the property. Or maybe over where the snow cone place used to be next to the Masonic Lodge, you know, under those trees. If a trailer was there connected to the Masonic Lodge, which they had them there before, you know, that would make that part of the street where there's it's like a missing tooth. And these are places that you put them where places where you're pretending in the future they're going to be buildings. So you're seeding a building, or like at Main and Daniel, you know, if you do that, if you just don't throw the book at them and make them just put in so much infrastructure, they have to leave them there for a long time to recoup that infrastructure. But I think that we need to have, I think we could have a quick workshop or something that we could come up with an ordinance, because I think we have to establish why we're doing it. I mean, why are we doing it? Is it, I see the reason to do it is to pretend that we're seeding future buildings. That's what I see. Or these parking lots, these ugly big retail parking lots with nothing on the edge. If you put the trailer up on the edge of the street, it kind of creates an urban edge, and it makes an interest to the building. And so I see it as doing it for a reason. In the parks, and I see it doing it with mostly trailers, because the trucks are transient. You know, they're going to come and go. If the business is bad, the truck's just going to crank the truck up and leave. If in parks, I think that's the best thing. In a park, it should be a truck, because it is a temporary thing. But in these other parking lots, I think you can do it. You can. I think the site plans ought to be approved. We ought to have some principles about the way we lay out the site, so it creates a good form, and Ramey's an expert in that kind of stuff. He knows, you know, what to do in that. And I think those are the devil's in the details here in this, to make this work right. Because otherwise, I've had problems with them just dumping their trailers right out into the parking lot or into the gravel. You know, and it's gray water. It's water out of a sink, but it's still it's still not, it's still not good. And so you got to have ways of dealing with those little peculiarities, besides the fact of everything that the health department wants and the fire department wants and those things. But I think we ought to establish why we're doing it. And that's what I would say, that we need a little more time. I think we could probably spend a couple of hours with Ramey, or hour and a half, and probably come up with an ordinance, and we could rob some stuff from, like Bentonville, Arkansas is a good place to get a really good one that's been written very well. I wrote the one in DeSoto, but we can look at that too. But I think that we can copy some other ones that have some good and bad, and do it quickly. Thank you.
Well, there's good examples just with Dallas and what Fort Worth has done, because they've been very successful at it as well. I go along with Mr. Veracruz and Mr. McBurnett. I think my comments are pretty clear that I am a proponent of the food trucks. It's an added benefit in terms of bringing community to our city and bringing the opportunity for what people are looking for. And knowing that Cedar Hill and Lancaster have not done anything, whereas DeSoto has, but we know where DeSoto's come from, that these would be a great benefit. Now, there are, as it's been commented on, we do have to look at a lot of the little details, when, how, where, and how attached, whether it's a trailer or whether it's a truck. But there's opportunities for both from what I'm seeing, and being personally familiar with these as a consumer, not as an operator or anything, but just as strictly as a consumer. They are very, very widely accepted. And I believe that our citizens would really like to patronize these. In terms of the competition aspect, yes, it is there. But at the same time, as Councilmember Cook said, competition is part of our democracy. It's part of our republic and what we do. We would be careful in terms of how we schedule these. It would not be a permanent thing. And with what Mr. McBurnett said about Harrington Park, I'd have concern about Harrington Park because of the concession stand there. But as far as the rest of our parks, I'm okay with those. They're again designated, scheduled, and under control. So I think is there any other inputs? Otherwise, I think we can give Mr. Ramey some latitude in saying, let's go ahead and you've heard our comments. I think we've answered your questions. You can begin to develop something. We're not ready, I believe, to proceed to, I don't believe the next time we come back with an ordinance, we're ready to approve it, because I agree with Mr. Anderson that there's probably some more discussion. But coming back with a straw man ordinance for us to look at that addresses what we've talked about tonight would be appropriate. As if everybody's in agreement with that, if we can just get a head nod or a thumbs up, something, so Mr. Ramey knows where to go, so I can see that.
I believe Councilwoman Jameson had a comment.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Jameson?
Yes. I agree with Councilmember Anderson. I think more discussion needs to be had on where and how we do it. And that's basically what you were saying, but I don't think we can give him anything to go on until we have a better idea. I think that if we have charges or whatever, those need to go back into maintaining wherever they go or for where they park. Like if we need to put cement down or whatever, the fee for it ought to go back into maintaining that place for them to park or whatever is needed for them to be there. And I just think that we need to decide where they can park and where they can't. There's a lot of different nuances, and probably we need to have some input from some of those restaurants or people that were concerned, so that we can calm the waters, if you will, that this is different. This is not in competition with you necessarily, because there's no way where for them to go in and sit down like a restaurant. It's a different concept, and just to make they can come and voice their feelings about whatever it is it has. If it's just plain competition, that's one thing. But I think conversation a lot of times can do away with that. That you can just talk about it and maybe overcome whatever objection.
Okay.
Councilmember Cooks has his hand up.
And Mr. Cooks.
Yeah, one last thing on my end, and that's for Randy to bring back to us, is how do you really track sales tax with this? And so when you come back to us, hopefully you'll share with us how you track sales tax, especially since it's a mobile opportunity for them to move from site to site, is how do you track sales tax so we can get sales tax back from it? And then number two, I hope to Councilman Anderson's comment that we can move this to a workshop, but not take too long to get this done and start working on it sooner than later, and getting all the feedback from staff as they bring a mock document back to us to work with.
Okay. All right.
Mayor, one last thing.
Okay, Mr. Anderson. Go ahead.
So on the competition thing, I can tell you what's happened in DeSoto. What happened over there is that we ended up capturing, we have 7 restaurants inside, 400 square foot each, and then 3 outside. So that's 10 new restaurants in the city at one time came in the city. And what we found over there was all of this money was going outside of the city. And so we have a food trailer over there. One of the food trailers over there is doing $100,000 a month. $100,000 a month. And then there's some inside ones out of 400 square feet that are doing, $70,000 a month. And it was going, all of that money was going somewhere else. And so I think it's kind of like the restaurant row kind of thing. It's similar to that, but I think the competition brought more business to the existing businesses that were there. And I would hope that this would do this for our existing businesses here.
What do you mean going somewhere else?
Going to another city. Going to the next city, going to Dallas to eat instead of eating there.
Yeah.
Not enough, we didn't have, it was a good way to provide alternative options. And in fact, during COVID, the sales went up. They went up. They were down that first month, everybody was locked down. But soon after that, the sales just went through the roof. It was really strange because, well, it was pickup for one thing. But secondly, it was an alternative, an option, a local option, for people that they didn't have, because all they had was fast food, and all the franchises. They didn't really have the specialty, the local specialty guys there. So I think it captured. I mean, you got 50,000. How many people? We have 50,000 people here. We have if you could just capture your locals, it would be huge. If you could capture your locals just from going somewhere else, even if you didn't get anybody from out of town. But that's my thought. Thanks.
Okay, I need to bring this to a close because it's looking at the time, we're pushing 7 and we've still got a pretty detailed presentation coming up on automated metering. So I believe, Mr. Ramey, that you have sufficient input to begin putting together something for us to consider again. And as I said, I don't believe the next time we get together, we'd be ready to look at an actual ordinance, but again, looking at more information. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. So moving on to item number B. This is a presentation discussing the status of the advanced metering infrastructure. And Mr. Beekman is the presenter on that one. Mr. Beekman.
Mayor, Council, how are y'all tonight?
Good, thank you.
Good, good. So tonight we wanted to bring advanced metering infrastructure back in front of y'all, give y'all an update of where we're at and where we want to be heading. As y'all are aware, the city's been looking at doing advanced metering infrastructure for a while now. Back in 2017, well, some funds were set back, as well as in 20 funds were set back for this project. And most recently, council issued a presentation on AMI where we recommended that we move to a new billing system, which was approved. That project is underway at the moment, and we are on schedule for a cutover in February of 2021. So with AMI, just in case nobody, or in case it's not clear, AMI is an integrated system. It brings your meters in, it brings communication networks in, and it brings management systems into one panel. And it allows for up-to-date water usage from not just the city's perspective, but also the citizens' perspective. Currently, we have a $5 million reserve for an AMI to get that implemented. The process of implementing an AMI solution for the city, it's a pretty what's the word I'm looking for? It's a pretty big endeavor. So we've got to choose a meter. We've got to figure out what's going to work best for the city, what's going to work best for the citizens. We've got to get boots on the ground to get those installed. And we're looking at about 14,000 meters, if I remember. We've got to be able to integrate that solution in with our billing system. We need to be able to communicate with our citizens what it is that we're trying to do, when we're going to do it, and how they're going to get there to see what the water bill is, basically that up-to-date information that we want to provide with them. Another important piece of it is going to be project management, overseeing the entire operation from beginning to end, not just the billing piece, but the actual install in the ground. And then at the end of all that, once you get all that done, you need to be able to verify that everything is working as is needed or as designed. And we need to be able to train staff on how all that operates. So to kind of help get us there, city staff has reached out and worked with a company called Performance Services. And we asked them to do a preliminary utility audit for us, where they identified the existing conditions of our system. They estimated what our water loss was and what we could recover. We previewed a few options, looked at a few possible options for metering solutions. They were able to provide preliminary project economics and provide us an estimated cost of the AMI project, which you can see is a range between 5.6 and 8.9 million, depending on the choice that is made for the project. So, and at this point, this is some of the data that Performance Services has got back to us, and I'm going to let Ira Nicodemus, he is with Performance Services, speak to the next slides. This is all data that they've provided for us.
Thanks, Tracy, and Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time tonight. The next few slides, we will have some detail on the study that we did. So if you do have specific questions, feel free to stop me, and of course we can go back through these as well. So first thing we're going to talk about is some of the savings and the reasons why you would look at doing this solution. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see the meters that you currently have. It's around 13,000 meters, primarily residential, as you'd expect. And what we really focus on is what are the losses or the inefficiencies in the system and what can be captured by updating the meters. So if you look at that top number, it's about 1.4 billion gallons. This is what you're purchasing to resell. If you go down to the bottom, the billed water, you see it's 1.26 billion. So the difference between those is water that's being lost in the system. And it's two main categories. So you have losses that happen before it gets to the meter. So these are leaks in the pipes and your aging infrastructure and that. And then you have things that happen at the meter. We call those recoverable losses because a lot of it is due to meter inaccuracy, billing errors, tampering, theft, things like that. So what we did in our study was we looked at the water loss report that you do each year, and we said, how much of this do we think we can recapture by updating to the new meters? So we'll move to the next slide and talk a little bit more about what that is. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but I'll kind of cut to the summary of what it is. So right now, that last slide we talked about, 86 million gallons right now are being lost that we could potentially recapture. So what we did was we did a water balance. We looked at the different meters you have. We look at the total amount of water. We look at what we've seen with similar cities we've worked with here in Texas, and we allocate all that to say, how much of that do we think we can capture? And our preliminary estimate is that of the 86 million being lost at the meter, about 46 million gallons could be recaptured by putting in these new meters that are more accurate. So right now, you're probably around an average of 95% accurate on those meters. The new ones will essentially be 100%. We call it 98.5, so we always want to be a little conservative. So when you look at the value of that, the dollars that are currently being lost, it's about $546,000 per year. So a pretty big amount that can be captured as a result of this. It's a payback on the investment for the project. So in the next slide, we'll talk about some different technologies that we can use to capture this. So we looked at 3 of them, and I'll talk briefly about kind of the differences. So as Mr. Beekman was saying, all of these are going to have the advantages of an advanced metering system. You're going to have, right now, you're manually reading the meters. These are going to be automated. It's going to be real-time data. There's a lot of data available. So rather than just saying, I use so much over the month, the citizens are going to be able to see on a mobile app what they're using when. They can see when they're filling up their pool or they kick on the sprinkler system. What does that do? So any of these options are going to give that data. The thing with option A is we said, well, what if we go with kind of a lower cost meter? So meters read water different ways. There's mechanical meters, there's electronic ones. The lower cost would be a mechanical. This is option A. The downside to this is that over time, as more water goes through those, they tend to become less accurate. That's kind of how you got in the situation you're in now, right? About every 10 or 15 years, those meters need to be replaced just because they aren't as accurate as they get older. So it's a lower cost up front, but over life, it typically doesn't save you as much because they lose and they introduce those inefficiencies. Go to option B. This is a meter that's real common these days, a solid state meter, ultrasonic or electromagnetic. And these ones don't have moving parts, so they maintain their accuracy a long time. Typically, we're seeing warranties of about 20 years on the meter accuracy. The other thing that we looked at is the ability to remotely disconnect the meters. So right now, there's about 400 remote disconnects that happen each month where the water needs to be manually turned off. So what we said is, well, what if we had 400 of these meters with that capability so the utility billing folks could remotely trigger that and shut the valve off if they needed to turn the water off for some reason. Option C is the same technology, but we're saying 2,500. So we just wanted to kind of give a range because those remote disconnects do cost a bit more. So you kind of want to use them in a strategic way where it makes sense. Next slide. Okay, so what is the breakdown on the numbers? You heard the range of the 5.6 to the 8.9. You'll see the detail on this. I know these are exact numbers, but keep in mind we are at a budgetary stage. So these will give you a pretty good estimate, but all these will be refined here as we move forward. You see it as a cost per meter. That savings is this increase in the first year. On option A, you'll notice it's a little bit lower. That's because those mechanical meters aren't quite as accurate as the electronic ones. The other savings we can look at is reduction in your operating and maintenance. So right now, all these are being read manually. I would imagine it's pretty labor intensive, a couple people doing a full-time job. We can reduce some of that by having this efficiency of doing it automatically. The first year reduction of water sewer forgiveness, it's about $60,000 a year. This is what happens when right now there's times where you have to credit water back or forgive it. It's usually due to leaks or things that weren't found. With the capability of this and the data, the real-time data, the leak detection, a lot of this will go down. So Look at your 20-year cumulative cash flow. This is after the project cost. This is net. You'll see that option B ends up being the best one over the life. The other thing that's good about it, and this relates to the chart that's at the bottom, is that each year it's cash flow positive. That means that the savings from the project are going to outweigh the cost. So we'll look at this in more detail for option B on the next slide. But what we're saying is that this essentially has a positive impact on the utility budget, because each year you're putting money back in even after you pay for the cost of the project at that 6.9 million. Next slide. So this is just for option B because it is the one with the best economics, some detail. And I know, again, there's a lot of information here, but it's pretty quick to understand it. We've already looked at these numbers, but you're just seeing it over a 20-year period. You have your increased water revenue from more accurate meters. You have your savings from operations, your reduction. So if you look at line 7, or column 7, that's going to be your total. It's about that 700-some thousand per year. Starting in 8, this is where we're talking about the cost of the project. Now, said that there is some utility fund balance. So we talked to Mr. Summerlin about, how would we want to do this, because there's not quite enough to cover the full $7 million. So what we said was, well, let's run this cash flow. And of course, all this can be adjusted based on the direction you'd like to take. But let's say that we took $3.5 million kind of cash, and then the balance, which happens to be about 3.5, so about 50-50 would be financed. Rates are really low. We got a quote, it's about 2.49%, and we ran that on a 15-year term. So you're just seeing the amortization over that period in column 8. The one other thing I'll point out is a lot of cities we're seeing choose to defer payments for 12 months after construction. Kind of gives you a really good positive cash flow in year 1. So we've modeled that as well. All this can be adjusted as needed based on your feedback. Annual service costs in 9. This is any cost that would be associated with running the system. This isn't paid to us, but whatever meter manufacturer, there's licensing agreements, things like that. So we want to put some in there to account for any increase in cost as well. And then there's really no maintenance cost to it. So in column 11 with the measurement verification, one of the things that we do as a company is we guarantee the performance of the project. So we'll continue to monitor this and make sure that you're actually getting what we're saying you're going to get. So it's a fairly small fee just to cover our costs. We report back to you each year. We'll test some meters, make sure they're still performing, and we can do that. We did it through the 15-year debt service, but we could really do it as long as you'd like to see it. So add those together is your total, and then the last one is the difference. So you'll see that in year 1, because we have those deferred payments, it puts a lot of money back in, over $700,000. And then once we get into a more standard system, you're still putting over $400,000 a year back in. So it's a really good return on investment, especially with the available fund balance that you have to help offset some of the cost up front. Last slide for me, then I'll turn it back to the team there, is a little bit about the delivery. As Tracy said, there's a lot involved with these projects. So what we do as a company is it's a single contract with performance services. The section you'll see there kind of by our logo is what we can do in-house. So I have a few folks from our team here in case you do have questions. They're from our engineering team. We will design the system. We'll help you pick the best solution. We have project managers, so we'll oversee the construction, make sure everything goes smoothly. We don't do change orders, so if there's any issues, our guys take care of it. We won't pass on a cost increase. We also have a marketing team, so any communications with the citizens, door hangers, town halls, whatever you might want to do, we can facilitate that as well. And then everything below that, we will subcontract. But because we're kind of unique in that we do open book pricing, so you'll be able to see, who we're bringing in. As much as possible, we like to use local contractors. We try to use, historically underutilized contractors as well. So you can have that input of, who are we using, because you can see all the pricing, all the bids. It's a very transparent process. So that's kind of in summary of how we deliver. We develop the project, and then we'll deliver it and make sure that it performs as well once it's completed. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tracy and the team for the next couple slides.
All right. So with that, so the next step in the process is actually to partner with Performance Services to take a look at the energy savings performance contract with them. So what that like Ira has pointed out, it guarantees savings under the contract. It's a single point of responsibility. I did a lot of research on Performance Services before we even talked with these guys. They actually come highly recommended. I spoke with the city of Jacksonville, Madisonville, Beeville, and a couple of others, and they all had a lot of positive feedback on Performance Services and the job that they did for them. We kind of look at partnering with Performance Services as an insurance policy to make sure that this project is done on time, on budget, and it operates as designed. So that way we know going in that, any problems that we have is going to be taken care of. It won't be any extra cost for us, which is kind of important as we go through this from my perspective. So what we would like to do next is to sign a letter of intent to proceed with an investment grade audit. The value of that audit is right at $39,000. And what that's going to do for us, it will we'll go ahead, it'll further define our condition, our existing conditions. They'll come back and they'll tell us exactly what the project's is going to cost the city. But it'll also allow us to, they actually go out and look at meter companies for us and bring them in, and they give us a choice of meters to help us fit our citizens and cities' needs. And then they'll come back with, the final pricing, the project economics, meaning what are we actually going to save for the project, and then how we're going to measure and verify those savings throughout it. And as that last step, we would receive that audit from Performance Services for the implementation. And then after all that's done, what we would do is come back to council with the entire project and get y'all's approval on it or your denial on it, whatever direction you would like to head. And with that, I'll entertain any questions. We also have Richard, who might have some feedback as well. He's on here.
Okay, great presentation, and thank you for that, Ira. In fact, I was making notes as you were talking, and I was making notes about, what is the life cycle costing and looking for an amortization schedule. And by golly, as you were going through that, you answered the questions that I had written down that I wanted to see in terms of life cycle costing over the term of 20 years and in terms of the amortization of the project itself. So my questions on those were answered by that pretty detailed slide that you had. Tracy, am I understanding correctly that Performance Services is going to basically act as a general contractor?
Right, yes, sir.
Because, they're going to open up the competitive bidding for the meters themselves and so on and so forth. So with looking at Performance Services as a GC in that particular respect, was there, I guess, the straight up question is, was there a competitive solicitation done, or what kind of competitive process was used to select Performance Services over any other firm that would act as a GC for this?
I did take a look at competitors or vendors that do a similar service, and quite honestly, they're Siemens. Siemens is one of them. They kind of cater to larger markets. Most of the vendors that I found that do something like this, that's their niche. They're the Dallas, the Atlanta, the Houston. Those are their target markets. I didn't find anybody that caters to our size to actually compare Performance Services to in the state of Texas.
Mayor, can I cut in real quick too and just add a real quick comment? As you recall, when we initiated the ERP project about a couple of years ago, and we hired a company called Barry Dunn. We had the similar kind of situation where we need a project manager that can help bridge the gap between our team and the installation of the product that had the expertise. Because there's other components other than just buying the meters. There's the issue of tying it into our UB system, and it's also the software that would be tied into the meters that would provide real-time information. So we're needing assistance to synchronize all of those facets with our AMI product. And that's one of the really key criteria that we wanted to make sure and ensure that would be taken care of. But as Tracy mentioned before, just like on the ERP project and trying to get a return on our investment, we want to make sure that we have the project information and putting all the pieces together on this project. And that's what's very complicated with this AMI system because of the number of moving parts associated with it.
Okay, I understand though, we're basically looking at a 20-year relationship with performance services. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, but the option's there. So let me go back to that slide real quick. If you right here, so they don't do the financing for this project. Some other company does. So we would actually, it would be financed through, a bank or something of the such. Quite honestly, at the end of the project, we could say thanks, see you later, or the partnership with them over the 20 years or the amortization of the entire project would be that M&D services. That's where they would come in every year and they would, take some meters out of the ground, test them, verify that they're working as planned, and give an overall health check of the entire system. So that would be the extended relationship past installation.
So if you were to sum up the entire value of this contract with performance services, what would be the net value in total? Looking at years 2 through 16 at $4,000 a piece. So 16 years times 4,000. Is that the dollar value of the essence of our relationship with performance services in addition to the 38,000 to begin the audit?
Oh, are you asking where they get their funding from?
Well, no, I'm asking what the net cost is to the city in terms of our relationship with performance services. What's the net dollar value of the contract?
I think it would depend on that. It depends on that final document that we get from them. So that's where we're going to find that net value. This right here is all very preliminary. So
if I can take that one. So essentially what happens is the next phase of this investment grade audit is firming up all that you're seeing here. So right now, these are budgetary, kind of a top down. And then the next one, we'd come back and we'd say, here's the firm cost and savings. Here's the final proposal for your approval. So the next stage of engagement is that, 39,000, let's call it. At that point, you can decide if you want to move ahead. Now, Mayor, as you said, we essentially are functioning as both the designer as well as the general contractor. So the entire value, let's say it is that $7 million, would go through us. That would be the contract. Once the project is complete, most cities choose to then have us continue to do this ongoing measurement and verification. So I modeled it as 15 years. Some folks just choose to do it for 5 years or 10 years. It's really just to give you that assurance that we continue to come back and say, hey, this is actually performing as planned. And if for some reason it's not, we're actually contractually on the hook for the difference. So we'd have to make up if there was a shortfall between what we projected and what actually happened. So think of it almost as 3 different things. The next phase of the study, the next one would be the actual project, which would be around 7 million. And then we can decide how much do you want to do for measurement verification, how many years. And you're not committing to it all up front either. Each year you could decide if you wanted to continue doing that ongoing measurement and verification.
I think what we're bringing to council is just the continued study in the project. Again, as mentioned before, we can once we give that information a better outlook of how we move forward with the AMI project, we don't have to stick with PSI. We can take that information and package it and go on beyond that if we wish to. I mean, as he said, we could continue with them, but I think we can look at the information and say this may not be what we're ready to do. And either the price tag is too steep, or that's not an investment that we wish to make. But we need more data to provide us that information to make that decision. Because as we've been moving forward, we started with 1.5 million. Now we're at 1.5, and now we're at 5 million. And so we need to have a better, understanding of the data as we'll continue to move forward. So we want to take these incremental steps, just like we did with the ERP for the UB. We had to do that no matter what, regardless of whether we move forward with the AMI. We had to update that software. We need to take the next incremental step and then do this comprehensive study to say, okay, where do we now go from here? Because this is still incomplete data as we continue to move forward. It's an option with PSI, but we need to take this next step.
At what point does Richard get involved in terms of looking at the financing? Because we are going to be short in terms of available funds that we've set aside for this.
I would not to answer for Richard, but I would say not until we have more information on what we're looking at the total universe as far as what our numbers are going to be. I think it'd be premature to begin talking about financing a system at this point. I don't think we're ready for that. And that's not what we're trying to propose. We're just trying to provide this as information in the next step as we move forward with the AMI project. That really is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to make this all encompassing. We're not trying to ask council to make one decision today on this information. It is kind of giving you a little bit more information as we move forward with what we're looking at. But again, it's incomplete at this point. But really what we're doing is we're bringing it to council's attention that we want to utilize this group, at least preliminarily speaking, a further, value study, value audit with our system to say, okay, what are we looking at? And then at that time, I think we will most certainly come back to council and say, here are the findings and where do we go from here? That is what we're trying to do. We really are trying to be very incremental about this.
Okay, so what we're looking at in terms of this IGA with performance services is still continuing to scrub numbers in terms of helping us as a council to determine how we're going to push forward, or if we are going to push forward in the manner in which we're going to do so.
That's right. Tracy, can you go to the last slide, please? Okay, one before that. Yeah. So really, where's it has the amount, maybe third to the last, but really what we're wanting to do is this performance audit, this value audit. Right, here we go. And that's for just with the 38. It's not this will not go beyond this. We will come back to council, and then council at that time need to look at, again, more information, more data to say, do we even continue forward with this project or not?
Okay, I'm a little more comfortable knowing exactly our relationship with performance services and what they're going to do for us.
Yes.
I will interject, and I'm going to call on other council members to see that we have some hands raised. I received in my inbox unsolicited proposals from companies wanting to install water meters in our city, companies I've never even heard of. And I'm sure that they're using some database to find my email, and maybe you're getting them and Tracy's getting them as well. So the number of firms that are out there that might be able to be considered by performance services is probably pretty large in terms of, but which ones are capable and which ones are just trying to sell stuff, I don't know. That's what we'd be looking to performance services to help us understand and guarantee that we're getting the proper equipment that's going to last us for that proposal.
I'll give you a good example, because again, you do get a lot of unsolicited asks for companies. There's a lot of companies out there that are purporting to do these things. I will give you, for example, without naming the company, there was a service that offered a turnkey approach with the city of Cedar Hill, and that company went out of business. And they are still trying to unwind that. And again, I don't want to mention the name of the company, but it was a company that also tried to solicit with city of Duncanville that we didn't move forward with them, and I think thankfully so. That's why I think we want to take a much more cautious approach in this and not just go all in with this. I think we need to take very measured approach. But that company left not only Cedar Hill, but Haltom City and some other cities in really bad straits because they completely left. They were providing the customer service. They had the customized software, which they had the ownership rights, and left those cities in really a tough spot. We want to make sure we're not doing that. Being very cautious with that. That's really what the point of this briefing session was all about.
Okay, I understand. Ms. Jameson, I believe you had some comments?
Well, for the $38,658, then you're just going to, can you boil it down to real simplistic, exactly what you're going to do?
Okay. Ira, can you provide?
Absolutely. So what we're doing is the end result is that you'll have firm costs and firm savings from the project. The way we go about doing that, one of the things that's a big component and it's a big part of the cost is that we'll get a third-party meter inspector. We'll do a statistical sample of actual meters in the ground. They will pull them, they'll test them, so we know exactly how much water is being lost due to inaccuracies versus a new one. So that's a big portion. We're also going to start to bring in and work with the staff on interviewing different manufacturers. We're not a manufacturer. We work with a lot of different folks. So we really say what's going to be best for you, help do that comparison, and then get pricing from them. As part of that, they also need to do some studies. They need to know, these systems, some communicate with cellular technology, some are radio systems. Can you get coverage? Or is everyone going to be covered? How is that going to look? So all of those comparisons will be done. So when we come back, it's a very detailed proposal that says, here's all the data behind it, and this is firm costs and savings for you to then consider.
And what about all of the, we're having issues with aging pipes in the ground and water leakage. So how do you?
That's all part, good question. The question came up in our budget. That's part of our CIP. So the main infrastructure, the pipelines and so forth are the things that we're covering in our utilities budget. So this is really talking about that at the meter beyond. And again, for example, that we talked about before with our current meters, we have to send meter readers out, and this is a monthly read. Between the first time that they read the meter and then from a month ago, you could have had the leak. So you don't know for an entire month, for example. So we're trying to talk about the meter to the house and where those leaks are, or how the performance of our meters measure up. I think your question, Councilmember Jameson, is really also geared toward our pipe infrastructure, the infrastructure in the ground. And again, those are also being addressed as part of our CIP in replacing that infrastructure. It's an important ingredient to your point. This is also important is, once that gets to that meter, where's that money going? Because that's where we have to have the interaction with the customers where we've had these leaks or we have issues with the meter. And this can help tremendously in resolving that part of the water loss that we have.
Paul, just one more comment on
Sure.
that. As Ira showed on one of his charts, there is a fair amount of what we call water forgiveness, because our leak policy is that we will take the difference between the amount of water that they use during the leak and what normal activity would have been for that month, and we split the difference. In other words, we write off or we eat that half, and the customer pays for half. And so the intent here with this metering system would be that we find those leaks much more quickly, so that we can cut down on the amount of leak adjustments.
I'm curious, this really doesn't have anything to do with that, but how they bleed the fire hydrants and they turn them on, they go full blast and they leave them. And there's tremendous amounts of water going out. Where does that go? I mean, on as far as accounting for the water usage.
That goes into the water loss. We try to measure and account for that because that's a part of the cost of your system. If you have deadheads in areas where you're losing chlorine residual, then you have to do that flushing. And so we only do that in areas that we have to do it.
And it is for what? I was told it was to get the material out of the water, like when
No, it's for chlorine residual. We have to clear that if it stays stagnant, like Richard said, in the deadhead area where it doesn't move. We have to clear that every once in a while. We have to maintain a chlorine residual within our system.
Okay, so it's not all of them all the time.
No, no, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
You're on mute, Mayor.
Mayor, your mic is muted.
Yeah, sorry. Tracy, go to the last slide. I guess what you're looking for is consensus from council at this point to go ahead and sign a letter of intent with performance services for this dollar amount. There is no vote required, I guess, because we're still in briefing, but it's some consensus of council that this is the right thing to do in terms of signing a relationship to have performance services do this very, very detailed audit and coming back to us at some point in time.
Yes.
Cooks, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. So let me ask, I know you mentioned the other cities were experiencing some issues. Did the other cities use the same process with the company's performance services or anyone else at all? Or
No. What happened is they went with a company that promised a turnkey solution. So they promised it kind of an all for one, where they said we would take care of meter installation, we would take care of the UP software, the customer relations software, we'll take care of all the bidding and everything else. And the other part of that is you didn't necessarily get to see what they were bidding out. We want to open this up, and as Ira had mentioned before, they won't be the ones purchasing. They will then open it up. Council will see what we're looking at. So we're trying to keep this very, very much open. But again, as we take these very slow processes, we want to go one step further, do the study, show the information to council, discuss it, and say, okay, now next steps. And kind of as we take a very slow approach. I think with the other cities, and this isn't meant to beat them up or anything, or to call them out, but when you go for an all or nothing, that could happen. And in all, their eggs were in that one basket, so to speak. So the company owned the software rights and these other things. We don't want to be in that position. We want to take a very measured approach to this. And so by basically breaking it out, that allows us to look at it as a city, to look at all those different components, look at the software, how do they interact? Will it be the best software, for example, that our residents can look at for that real-time information? Those are the things that we want to be very careful with. But we still need more information to help make these decisions.
And I would agree. Thank you guys for sharing what you've shared so far. A little bit more about, I'm trying to read the more information about performance services. How did we get to know, how did it come up for us to know about performance services themselves as we go through this process, as you guys went through this bid process?
Yeah, as Tracy mentioned before, he reached out to other cities. I've reached out, they've come recommended. As he mentioned, we can go with Johnson Controls or Siemens. There's a lot of companies that could also do this, but they're also very big time players. We wanted someone that would be accommodating to us and the number of meters. Again, you'd think that having 12,866 accounts would be a large account base. It is not necessarily the case. And so we also wanted them to be able to really help us because of our bandwidth with our staff. So that was where they came in. Again, highly recommended. As a matter of fact, AC Gonzalez, former city manager of Dallas, who I know, also highly recommend this group. But we also checked it out. I mean, to make sure that they can perform the services. And again, we may get to the point when they provide this audit, we may be unsatisfied with them, and we may not have a relationship with them any further than that. And so I think, again, by taking this approach, we can kind of make sure that they're doing what they need to for us.
All right, thank you.
Just like we used Barry Dunn, when we chose Barry Dunn, again, they came highly recommended, but also a company that's familiar with the different types of meters, different types of softwares. Barry Dunn provide that same service for us as we initiated the ERP system. And again, Tracy mentioned the insurance. I think that means getting these things done on time. And again, that's what we're looking at as we integrate this, especially with the ERP system.
All right, thank you. Those are my questions.
Councilmember Jameson, I believe, had a question. She was, or somebody.
Yeah, it was me. I was
Yeah.
just curious on the, maybe I missed it. It was on a slide, but we don't have a breakdown of the 38,658 as to, how much is going to what?
We have the bullet points here, but we could provide the proposal or what have you to count.
I would like to see that.
Okay.
That would make me feel more comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, and Mayor, to answer your question, we're just we want to give you an update. We keep talking about AMI, and I know we approved the software for the ERP. This was kind of our next step of just as we move forward with the AMI. That is what the intention of this briefing was. But we can provide the proposal, and then again, there's not an action on it. This is what we want to. This is our next step, and just kind of get council buy-in.
Understand. I need to ask Councilmember Jameson a question. Do you not want to permit them to go ahead and have the letter of intent signed until you see the actual proposal, or you're okay with having the letter signed and seeing the detail later?
Well, I would assume that we would put this on the next agenda to vote on, and if they could bring the breakdown of where the money, what it was going for, so we could see. It's kind of odd to just have an amount and what is it going for?
Well, it talks about kind of the bullet points there, and
I got it. But do you sign for amounts and don't know what the breakdown is of where it's going?
I do not.
That's odd.
And that would come. We will share that. This is again under the $50,000 amount, but we can share that amount and bring it forward.
Right.
This was just the one step to have them move forward with this. And again, it was just trying to show council what we're doing from a step standpoint. But we can most certainly provide the letter of intent and the proposal.
Is there any other comment or objection to moving forward with the letter of intent from any other council member? Hearing and seeing none, then based on the consensus of what we have, the proposed letter can proceed, and we will provide, and Mr. Frederickson will provide all of us with the detail of how this, the line item of the 38,658. So we can move ahead with that. All right, thank you very much. We are pushing on time, but at the same time, these are very necessary discussions, and there's been no time wasted whatsoever on these two items so far. So really appreciate that. And also to our citizens that are logged in listening, I hope you will accept our apologies or understand that, we are a very questioning council. We like to ask questions. We like to dig in. We like to get answers. So sometimes it's not possible for us to stick with the time factors that we have. We wish we could, but business is business. And I believe our doing due diligence and what we've done here tonight is the proper thing to do. And unfortunately, it's taken us a little longer than 1 hour that we had allocated for. So we're moving on to item C now. This is the calendar. Mr. Frederickson, is there anything, or Kristen, is there anything significant that we need to discuss on the calendar at this moment?
Yeah, so Mayor, members of council, again, as we discussed last month, Kristen's going to bring up the calendar. We had pushed the joint meetings until September. I think just having a discussion with council and the fact that we're still kind of dealing with COVID, but more importantly, we're still trying to run through the traps, if you will, on ultimately being able to have joint meetings with, for example, the EDC, with the Parks Board, and especially with the Planning and Zoning. We're working out some solutions to be able to have those joint meetings where we can have them in the same room, have the social distancing, and be able to broadcast that so our citizens can see the meetings and the deliberations. You know, again, when we had the council budget workshop in the briefing room, we were able to maintain the social distancing by keeping staff in the other in the council chamber, just having council and the key staff during parts of the presentation. But when we have both groups together, we can't. We would not be able to fit them in that room. So we're trying to work on solutions so that you can have those joint meetings. And I know council has expressed that they would like to have those in person with those groups and not via Zoom. So with that being said, I think we're not at that point to be able to have the joint meetings in September, but our hope is to have things worked out by October and have those scheduled so that we can move with the zoning. And I know other crucial items such as incentive agreement, policy options, and that kind of thing. So we're as anxious as anyone else to move forward with that. But in light of the COVID, the numbers, I'm curious to council's input about continuing Zoom as well with council meetings through September.
Well, seeing the data coming out of the county in terms of new cases, and even as those new cases apply to our jurisdiction, it looked as though things were going well for a couple of days. I won't even say a couple of weeks, but we've had a spike. It's pushed up over 800, pushed up over 1,000 today. So in terms of looking at the future, I think it's quite reasonable for us to continue to suspend those joint meetings until the technology is available. To allow us to conform to the law and the participation necessary for us to do what we have to do. So unfortunately, that's the nature of what we're dealing with, and it is what it is. So as you said, Mr. Frederickson, continue to suspend any joint meetings until we have the technology, and that likely will be sometime in October, and you can keep us updated on that.
Okay. One other item, typically council, that you on the October, if I can draw your attention to the October 6th agenda. Typically we would have National Night Out. We would have it at the Rec Center. That joint or that meeting is being canceled because there would almost be no way to be able to social distance, unfortunately. What we are going to do is try to work with neighborhood groups or associations throughout the city so that they can have their own National Night Out events, and that, you know, you could staff, you know, the police department or if council wants to attend that. So typically we've canceled the first meeting in October so that council could attend the National Night Out event. Now that we're pushing it to the neighborhood, so I guess the question is, do we want to cancel that first meeting in October? But in light of the fact that we'll be canceling the National Night Out event, would we want to go ahead and have that council meeting on the 6th of October?
It's interesting that you mentioned having neighborhood night out groups getting together, because about 2 or 3 years ago, that's exactly what happened. And I was personally invited to 3 of them around the city. And people really enjoyed that. The neighborhoods enjoyed it. The community feeling was very, very strong when the neighborhoods got together in their small groups. And I think it's going to be a good thing for us as council members to go out into the city and to participate in those small groups. And I think our citizens are probably ready for something like that. You know, you hear the people saying, I really miss getting together with so-and-so. I really miss seeing somebody, just having a face-to-face conversation. So my personal opinion is, I go along with your recommendation, Mr. Frederickson, that we cancel October 6th, and in that stead, we as council members be out in our city participating in those community or neighborhood night outs that are put together. And of course, we would rely pretty heavily on our police department for Doug Six, I get, because he does a lot of work with that in terms of getting those organized, letting us know where to go. And the presumption is that social distancing and masks are probably still going to have to be in effect come October. So that's something to prepare for. Any discussion from council members on what I've talked about for October 6th?
I think Mayor Pro Tem has something to say.
Don, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you, and I'll also make the comment that we have 3 Tuesdays in September, or potential options that we could meet at the end of September if we had other business we need to conduct.
I would like to state, though, we do have the SGR interviews on the 22nd, which is in September on a Tuesday. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, thank you. I was talking about September 29th is open. We have more business we need to conduct.
I think Councilmember Cooks also had something.
Yeah, I think since we're on the calendar, and I'm not sure which item, but we've talked a lot of different items about having to get more details for. I think it's probably time for us to set on the calendar for a couple of workshops for us to have items that we just particularly focus in on for a workshop. So I would like to see us either in September or October schedule some type of workshop for us, whether it be on AMI, whether it be on the food trucks, or something where we are workshopping some of the items where we get more detail. Well, since we're on the calendar.
Okay, so Kristen and Mr. Frederickson, if you'd work on some proposed dates for us and pump something out, we'd appreciate that. That's a good idea, Mr. Cooks. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. No discussion further. That brings us to the end of our work session. And coming up on 7:47 at this particular moment. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Frederickson.
We do have an executive session item that if you want to go to that real quick, I do not think that will take very long.
All right, I will accept that recommendation. So the timestamp for tonight is okay. Okay, so a timestamp on our ending our work session. We'll call it what, 6:47?
Mayor Gordon, can you read the caption before we call it?
Yes, I will. The executive session on our city council agenda is city council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code. Deliberations about real property to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. To wit, real property is generally located south of Wheatland Road, east of Cedar Ridge, and west of Cockrell Hill Road. So city council members, if you would please leave this meeting and go to your login for the executive session, we will reconvene into executive session, and I will take a timestamp on that. Thank you very much.
7:48.
All right. Where do you go? Well, there you are. Okay, Mark, you're in. Okay. All right. We are all back, and we are convening our city council at the timestamp is 8:09. Calling to order city council at 8:09. And Councilmember Harvey, if you would please give us the invocation.
Thank you, Mayor. Will you join me in a word of prayer? Dear God, our Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this opportunity, not only to serve you, but most of all to belong to you. And we're thankful, dear God, that you've given us this opportunity to serve our communities, And we pray to God that you would lead, guide, and direct us, that our goings forth from this moment forward would give you honor and glory and accomplish your heart's desire for the people of Duncanville. Continue to lead us and guide us. Help us to set a good example before your people and our neighbors. This we ask in Jesus' name, and for his sake we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Man, thank you. Would you please rise and individually say the pledges to our flags? All right, moving on to item 1, the mayor's report. I do have a couple items I'd like to cover. First is that our fire chief, Chief Sam Rohde, was honored by the North Central Texas Council of Governments, along with the police, fire chief of Cedar Hill, fire chief of DeSoto, and fire chief of Lancaster for a regional cooperation award. This is a very prestigious award, and we're very thankful and very proud of Chief Rohde and his staff for emergency management coordinator Tonya Hunter for what she has done to bring all this together. So the North Central Texas Council of Governments gave this award to Chief Rohde, and it was done virtually last week. And at some point they said that the actual item will be presented together. So we'll get to that as soon as they can pull everything together. Talking about COVID-19, just to give an update, today it was reported an additional 1,850 cases, which is a huge spike. So we're trying to find out, are we flattening the curve as a city or as a county? And how are things going? Well, we're not, because of this huge spike, and there was additional 4 deaths. In terms of looking at our individual city, zip code 137 has 456 new cases in total, and zip code 116 has 626 cases for a total of 1,082 cases to date. So we are still experiencing community spread, and I urge all of our citizens to continue to practice social distancing, to wear masks, and if you don't have to go out, don't. But continue to patronize our businesses in our city by doing takeout orders and pick up as best as you can. One of the other things that I would like to mention as well, probably going to have to go to Kristen to explain it, but Kristen is now 100% officially certified as a city secretary. So congratulations to her. It's been a long, hard road, but she's passed all the exams, and we're very, very proud of you, Kristen. So great work, commendable. Kudos to you putting that crown on your head. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. One other thing, 2 other things I want to mention. The other one is that it was published on our website in our community bulletin about the crime mapping tool that is now available. And so any citizen can go into crimemapping.com, enter your zip code, and it pops up with all the crimes that are being reported for that particular week. I did go on to the website and take a look at it. And if you blow that out, it goes all the way over to Fort Worth and Arlington, and you can see everywhere the crimes are being committed throughout the entire DFW area if you want to. And if you're really curious, you can put in the zip code for New York City and see how they compare. But anyway, crimemapping.com is now live and available to all of our citizens, and that's to the great efforts of our police department and IT as well. And the final item I would like to cover is a proclamation. We, the city of Duncanville, or I, became aware in some communications with the mayors of Fort Worth and Arlington that they are putting out a proclamation for a day of prayer tomorrow. And I am joining with the mayor of Fort Worth and the mayor of Arlington in this proclamation, and I would like to read it for you. Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic had brought illness and death to many residents of Duncanville, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has caused great economic harm, putting people out of work, closing businesses, and bringing hunger and hardship to many residents of Duncanville, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted the education of the children in Duncanville and put our educators at risk, and whereas the COVID-19 continues to spread throughout Duncanville, and whereas the best human efforts have not yet found a cure, and whereas throughout the history of Duncanville, the state of Texas, and our nation, people have turned to God in prayer to bring healing and deliverance where human efforts have failed, and whereas August 19th, 2020, shall be designated as Pray Duncanville Day, a day of prayer for the eradication of COVID-19 from the city of Duncanville, and whereas residents of Duncanville are encouraged to pray in place, whether at home, at work, or at school, at the noon hour on August 19th, 2020, and whereas houses of faith are encouraged to ask their people to pray wherever they are at noon on August 19th, 2020, and whereas all are encouraged to unite in prayer, humbly asking God to eradicate COVID-19 and heal Duncanville. And whereas let us also rededicate ourselves to bringing healing to the sick, comfort to the brokenhearted, help to the needy, wisdom to our children, and hope to the hopeless, and unity to the city of Duncanville. Therefore, I, Barry L. Gordon, Mayor of the City of Duncanville, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, August 19th, 2020, as Pray Duncanville Day in the City of Duncanville. And then as I said, that proclamation mirrors the proclamations being issued, that have been issued in the City of Fort Worth and the City of Arlington as well. So if you would like to, set that time aside for tomorrow at noon to pray for our city. That concludes the items I have for the mayor's report. Any items for the council members? Ms. Jamison.
Yes, I've got something that I wrote here because today is on August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment went into effect 100 years ago. Today is the anniversary. It required 3 generations of fearless activists over a span of more than 7 decades working in more than 900 state, local, and national campaigns to finally win the vote for American women. Women were not given the vote. They were not granted the vote. As one commentator stated, they took it. The fight for women's suffrage is one of the defining civil rights struggles in our nation's history, one that cuts to the heart of what democracy means. Who gets to participate in government? Who has a voice? When we say we the people, do we really mean everyone? Americans entered the summer of 1920 with the economy slipping from recession to depression. The global pandemic of the influenza was subsiding, but had already claimed 600,000 American lives. There was racial unrest, and the Ku Klux Klan was in resurgence. There were labor strikes for better wages. Immigration was a contentious issue, and there was a desire for more isolationist foreign policy, and a nasty presidential campaign was underway. Women had taken on roles of working in mines and munition factories as streetcar conductors, truck drivers and pilots, as farmerettes and lumberjills, as well as doctors and nurses, proving their patriotism and their citizenship during World War I. By taking on these roles during World War I, never asked of American women, this made it harder for American men to argue that women were the weaker sex, were too emotionally unstable and intellectually limited, did not deserve or want the right to vote. 26 nations had already extended writing votes to women, including Great Britain, Russia, and Germany. If America had just fought a war to make the world safe for democracy, how could it deny half of its citizens a voice in that democracy? The Senate passed the Women's Suffrage Amendment in June 1919 after being defeated in committee or on the floor of the House or the Senate 28 times. It passed by a margin of 2 votes in the Senate and then went to the states for ratification. When they were not in regular session, so they had to call them back to suffragettes had to convince 30 governors to call their legislatures back into special session. 35 states had ratified, but 36 or 3/4 of the 48 states in the Union at that time were required for full ratification. Tennessee became the 36th state after 7 decades of furious debate and passionate protest. The enfranchisement of half of the citizens of the United States finally won the right to vote. I am proud of the fact that on June 28th, the Texas legislature ratified the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, making Texas the 9th state to ratify it. The suffragists debated and lobbied, drafted legislation, and campaigned. They kept going even after the 19th Amendment was secured. The League of Women Voters was founded 6 months before the ratification, so it also came about during that time. Voting rights are the stress test of the health of our democracy. The most meaningful way to commemorate the centennial of the 19th Amendment and the legacy of the suffrage movement, made up of women of all ages, classes, and races, and all political persuasions and party affiliations, is to rededicate ourselves to expanding and improving our democracy by protecting voting rights for all citizens, making sure every citizen can vote without barriers, without difficulty, and without fear. So I think it's a big deal that today, this is the actual date, August 18th, is the 100th birthday of, well, in 2018, 53% of the vote were women. So if you'll just join with me in celebrating the fact that we get to vote.
Amen. Thank you very much for that reminder. Mr. McBurnett, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody census is going on and we have enumerators out and people to continue to do it because it's funding and it helps us as a community as well. So thank you.
And as a comment, we're at 68% in the city of Duncanville. Might sound good, but it's not. It is not good. We need to be up well over pushing almost 80%. So as those enumerators go out and knocking on doors, we hope that they're able to increase our percentage of participation. Mr. Cooks, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you very much for always reminding us of Census 2020. I also agree with the mayor on the 68%. We're actually lower than our sister cities next to us as well. But again, we're all in the 60s, so it's nothing to brag about. But more so, we hope that our citizens will make sure that they are making sure to answer the census questions. I also want to thank Sunday, we had an opportunity to go and join in with the Family of Faith Community Church at their 16th anniversary in Duncanville on Camp Wisdom in Hill City. So I want to thank Pastor James
Sneed.
Thank you. Let's blank. Pastor James Sneed for inviting me and the mayor there to participate in their outdoor blast of being in Duncanville for 16 years. So thank you for that church family. And then I do want to remind everybody to shop locally as much as you can. When you do get out, go shop locally and keep your face covering there for sure. If you have problems finding your face covering, Costco has plenty different type of face covering for you to go in that's cool, that's cloth, whatever you need. So I want to thank our businesses for implementing their face covering as you go into their places of business. I do have my meat Connect and Learn coming up this coming Saturday. And let me just remind you, if any council member would ever like to attend or be a part of that, you're more than welcome. I'll also give you a chance to have anything words you want to say as well. But it is this Saturday called Meet, Connect, and Learn. And this particular subject matter is, are you a senior citizen, a caregiver, or a family in need of additional services? I will have the CEO of the Community Council, Charlotte Myers, who will be my guest person speaking on ways services can be rendered to our seniors and caregivers, as well as families in need. We will have Noel Garcia, our own senior citizen director, who will be on the call as well, talking about what we're currently doing in Duncanville for our seniors as well. So I encourage you on this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. to join us on a Zoom call. You can either do it by Zoom or you can call in. It is on our social media website for the city. So please feel free to join in and enjoy our Meet, Connect, and Learn on this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11:15. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other city council member reports? Okay, city manager's report, Mr. Frederickson.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 2. Well, I already read my proclamation. There isn't any other additionals. We're now moving on to item number 3, which is citizen input. And pursuant to section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code, any member of the public has the opportunity to address the city council concerning any matter of public business or any posted agenda item. However, the act prohibits the city council from deliberating any issues not on the public agenda, and such non-agenda issues may be referred to city staff for research and any future action. All persons addressing are subject to city council rules and limitations permitted by law. And in order to speak, we have brought the technology so individuals that wish to speak can now do so live. They can send citizen comments in by email as well, but they have to do that. And we have 2 individuals that I believe do wish to speak. And our citizen comment time is still in effect at 2 minutes. And the city secretary will be timing the citizen comments at 2 minutes. So the first one is from Dimitri Martin at 210 North Venice Drive, Duncanville, Texas, 75116. So Ms. Martin, you have the floor for 2 minutes. Please go.
Thank you for having me, Mayor and fellow city councilmen. Thank you for bringing the history of the League of Women and Rights. That was one of my speaking points as to the early voting and how we're going to address the things that we're seeing in the news as of late to ensure those same rights, and the postaging, the mailbox handling. I know that that's supposed to be addressed within the next week. But again, to assure that our voting and then our early voting ballots, I went on vote.org, but had not received any other insider information regarding that. That's one speaking point. We spoke in reference to COVID-19, and our kids are going to be going back to school. I have one left in school. And so as a 30-year healthcare provider, my concerns, collectively, the community, staff, my scholar, how are we going to address that transition? Do we have a plan in place for our staff? What type of cleaning products and things of that nature do we have? I proposed and went to, and I'm on the actual board for that, and spoke with the superintendent and principal regarding it, but had no feedback regarding that. Are we taking in consideration the needs or any type of allergies with opening our schools for our students beyond a temperature check for whatever products that you're currently using? as opposed to what is out there. EPA has recommendations and has taken over 70 products offline. I'm sorry?
Your 2 minutes has expired. Can you wrap up in just the next few seconds?
Thank you so much. And then the last is the ordinance about obstruction of sidewalks, height regulations, and how long those things can be, the materials can, obstruct the sidewalk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next individual is Patricia Ebert, 115 South Greenstone. Ms. Ebert, are you there? Or do you wish me to read? I can read your comments as well.
We are gonna try to move her over now, Mayor.
Okay.
Are you there, Patricia?
I see she's appeared. She just needs to unmute. Ms. Ebert, you have the floor if you want to unmute. I can read your comments or you may express them.
Tracy, can you see if you can unmute her?
Ms. Ebert, can you hear us? Ms. Ebert, can you hear us?
I did successfully unmute her.
Yeah, I can see that she's unmuted. Ms. Ebert, can you hear us? The floor is yours. Okay, we're apparently having some technical difficulty with Kristen, you think we can resolve this?
I'm not sure what's wrong. She's unmuted, so.
Yeah.
She did provide it to, it's a good thing she did provide it in writing to you.
Yes, I have those. I have it in writing in front of me. Why don't I go ahead and read what she has submitted, and
Yes,
you can communicate with her that we have inserted her comments. Okay. Hello. Okay. This is Patricia Ebert, 115 South Greenstone. She has 3 bullets. Bullet number 1, I recommend that the projected $49,000 savings of moving detention services to the DeSoto Tri-City Jail be allocated to the city's tree fund. Per interim city manager Frederickson, quote, the city has designated tree fund that is tied to tree preservation ordinance pertaining to land development. The revenues into this fund have diminished greatly over time due to very little land development in Duncanville, end quote. Current balance is about $40,000. I fear Duncanville's tree city designation is endangered since many of the trees in our parks are older and now dying. Our consultant contractor Arbor Masters is excellent at identifying diseased trees and removing them, but we need to begin replanting trees. Bullet number 2, I applaud Councilman Cook's request for a list of contractors / consultants, their services and their fees. Period. With that data, we taxpayers can add greater clarity to headcount and associated salaries. Bullet number 3, I thank Councilwoman Jameson's clarification of public comments so that we taxpayers may speak in real time going forward. And that covers Ms. Ebert's citizens' comments. So that closes item number 3 on our agenda. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4 on our agenda is the consent agenda. City Secretary, would you please read the items?
all right. Item 4A, consider the minutes for the July 21st City Council regular meeting and the July 27th and July 28th City Council special meetings. 4B, consider a resolution to enter into a joint election agreement and election services contract between Dallas County and other jurisdictions during election on November 3rd, 2020, to be administered by the Dallas County Elections Administrator in accordance with Subchapter D of Chapter 31 and Chapter 271 of the Texas Election Code. 4C, consider a resolution authorizing a purchase with Vermeer, Texas, Louisiana for 500-gallon vac trailer through the local government purchasing cooperative contract number 597-19 in an amount not to exceed $57,904.55. You're muted, Mayor.
Thank you. The chair will accept a motion to approve.
I'd like to make the motion to approve, Mayor.
I have a motion to approve by Councilmember McBurnett. We have a second by Councilmember Vera Cruz. City Secretary, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Vera Cruz, for or against?
For.
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Anderson, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Cooks, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Jameson, for or against?
For.
At-large Councilmember Harvey, for or against?
For.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
For. Thank you. The motion is approved unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, items for individual consideration. Item 5A, consider resolution authorizing the award of bid IFB number 2020-068 demolition services to Midwest Wrecking Company of Texas Incorporated for the real property located at 730 East I-20, City of Duncanville, in accordance with proposed pricing bid tabulation attached hereto and incorporated herein as Exhibit A in an amount not to exceed, and I'm making a note here, please, there is a typographical error in this dollar amount that is here in this particular portion of our agenda. It shows $163,450. The correct amount that should be in there is $163,845, and it is a typo error here only in the entire packet and all the documentation and in the bid tabulation. The correct dollar amount is there, and I want to make sure everyone understands that. So all the decisions made in terms of this particular contract are made on the proper dollar amount of $163,845. Turning this over to Ms. Jessica James, Director of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This evening, first of all, we'll do a little bit of updates on the background in terms of how we arrived. Next slide, please. In terms of how we have arrived where we are this evening. As you all know, in 2017, the DCEDC Board and City Council identified the former Toyota property located at 730 East I-20 as a key piece of property in the community, as it is at the entrance of our community. The property was also identified in the Duncanville Comprehensive Plan to be redeveloped into an upscale retail, commercial, and entertainment area. In April of 2018, the City Council unanimously approved the purchase of the property from the school district in the amount of $900,000. Next slide, please. In May of 2018, the DCEDC amended their budget to approve and purchase the property. And then on May 15th, the DCEDC did close on that property. In January of 2019, a Phase 1 environmental site assessment was conducted and determined the property did have 11 underground hydraulic lifts that had been closed in place and 1 storage underground tank that had been filled in place on the site. These 12 structures will need to be removed for redevelopment purposes. Next slide, please. A lead and asbestos survey was then conducted as a result from that Phase 1, and it determined that lead and asbestos remediation was necessary as well for repurposing or demolition of the buildings, including the asphalt removal. The city has received quotes from licensed firms to conduct each of these abatements, and the abatements will be done at time of demolition. In March of 2019, the EDC received a notice from the building official for the structure as the structure was substandard. There had been a number of break-ins and the public could access the building. So that was shored up, and from that point, though, until now, the city has had numerous repairs to secure the building because of constant break-ins. It's from breaking glass, doors, and numerous things. Next slide, please. In April of 2019, the DCDC board unanimously approved the demolition of the buildings on the property. This item was then sent on to City Council for consideration for the demolition. At that meeting, the City Council did not approve awarding the contract for demolition and asked the DCEDC for further review of the use of the buildings on the property. From that direction, the DCEDC board hired Insight Research Company to conduct a land study to further analyze the different scenarios utilizing the current buildings as well as partial or complete demolition of the structures in order to determine the highest and best use of the property for the community. Next slide, please.
Let me try closing it and reopening it. It looks like it didn't render properly when I opened it the first time.
Well, moving on, and we'll come back. Moving on, in January of 2020, the DCDC board and City Council did review the report during a joint meeting, and both voted at that time to demolish the buildings on the property. That was held at the library. In January of 2020, the purchasing department issued an IFB for demolition of services. However, the lowest bid did not meet the listed specifications per the bid requirements, and the second closest bidder was 68% higher and did not fall within the budgeted amount. Slide 7, please. One more, please. Thank you. So this, as council knows, this is the location of the property. You can see there at the north side, it is housed between I-20 and Cockrell Hill on the access road. Next slide, please. Here's some pictures just to refresh everyone's memory in terms of what the inside looks like. You can see that there has been water damage from the roof leaking. And this area continues to get worse as time goes on. Next slide, please. And again, this is evidence. We looked at the foliage growing in there, and then as well as the floor showing some type of signs of the tile buckling. In addition, last year during the winter time, there was a pipe that froze as well in the one building, and so there was some flooding that took place. Next slide, please. And again, here's just some further example of some of the damage that has taken place over time from it being vacant. Next slide, please. On May 29, 2020, bids were released via public purchase by the purchasing manager. Notices were sent to 36 vendors and 148 historically underutilized businesses via email. 6 proposals were received, and one that was received was deemed non-responsive as they did alter the bid document. Next slide, please. Here is a list of the bidders that did submit proposals, and as you can see, Midwest Company of Texas, Inc., from Fort Worth, Texas, is who we are recommending to award the bid to tonight. Next slide, please. Here's the bid tabulation, Mayor, that you spoke about earlier. And as you can see there, Midwest Wrecking and the dollar amount encompassed. Now, I do want to definitely point out, and this will be something that we will further discuss, the 163,845 that you see on the bid tabulation there. It does not include the price per cubic yard for the clean fill dirt for the backfill property. It will take approximately, they're estimating approximately 60 days that once they are giving the go-ahead or the opportunity to move forward with the demolition of the property. Next slide, please. After evaluating the total demolition costs and the unit pricing per cubic yard for clean fill to backfill the property, it was determined that Midwest Wrecking Company of Texas, Inc. provided the most advantageous proposal for the city. And again, I want to stress this and point this out to council again, that the amount for approval tonight does not include the cost for clean fill dirt to backfill the property. Until the lifts and the tank are removed, the contractor does not know how much dirt is going to be needed. Therefore, City Council might need to approve an additional amount in the future for the backfill cost. On August 3rd, 2020, the DCDC board did approve amending their budget to include $202,264 for the demolition and abatements. So that included the $163,845 plus the cost for the lead as well as the asbestos abatement and the monitoring that goes with those. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Will you go back to that last slide for a second? The next one. All right, thank you. All right, thank you.
Okay, the chair will accept a motion to approve.
So move.
We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Cooks. Is there a second?
Second by Mayor Pro Tem.
Second by Councilmember Mac Burnett. Thank you for that. City Secretary, a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Vera Cruz, for or against?
For.
Mayor Pro Tem Mac Burnett, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Anderson, for or against?
Against.
Councilmember Cooks, for or against?
For.
At-large Councilmember Harvey, for or against?
For.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
For Councilmember Jameson.
I'm sorry, Ms. Jamison, for or against?
For.
Thank you. By a vote of 6-1, the motion is approved. Thank you very much, Council. Moving on. 1 minute. Excuse me. Moving on to item 5B, consider resolution approving the terms and conditions of the interlocal cooperation agreement by and between the city of Duncanville, Texas and the city of DeSoto, Texas for the use of the DeSoto Tri-Cities Jail facility for the handling, processing, housing, and detention of persons arrested by the city of Duncanville Police Department. Presenting this item is Police Chief Robert Brown. Chief Brown, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this item. In January of this year, former City Manager Kevin Hugman directed the Police Department to conduct a feasibility study to determine what benefits, if any, the City of Duncanville would enjoy if we transition our detention services to the DeSoto Tri-City Jail. In April, that feasibility study was presented to council outlining the pros and cons of moving those services. On June 8th, we presented all of that information to council, and council directed the police department to proceed forward and bring back a interlocal agreement, which we are doing this evening. So Mayor, I'd like to just briefly go through the PowerPoint presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have. Next slide, please. So again, this evening, we will walk through the interlocal agreement for transitioning our detention services to the city of DeSoto. Next slide. So the services that are outlined in the agreement basically includes the handling, processing, housing, and detention of adult arrestees. It also includes the arraignment of the arrestees that we transport to the DeSoto jail, as well as the handling of any bond monies that's associated with those arraignments. Next slide. The agreement is for 3 years. The first year is at an amount of $270,000, and year 2 and 3 is at a fixed amount of $310,000. The 310 amount is a commitment that's the cost is split evenly with our partner agencies, which is the city of DeSoto, the city of Cedar Hill, the city of Lancaster, and if the council approves, it would be the city of DeSoto, Duncanville, excuse me. Next slide. So Mayor, we talked about the benefits associated with moving the detention services to DeSoto, and I'd like to briefly just walk through the benefits. The first year savings is at an estimated amount of approximately $95,000, and we arrived at that figure by taking the first year cost of $270,000, and we subtract that from $365,000. Now, $320,000 is the FY20 budgeted amount, but we also included some costs that was discovered in the feasibility study. There is approximately $10,000 in overtime, and there will be an estimated savings from the court of approximately $35,000. The second bullet point is obviously by not having prisoners in our holding facility, it's going to reduce the primary reduction there would be liability not being in our jail anymore. And then finally, what we will see is we will see additional space in our police facility. We are outgrowing our space over here, and if the council chooses to approve this agreement tonight, we will have additional space that we can reimagine in the future. Next slide. And so what will happen, Mayor and Council, if this is approved tonight, we're going to create a transition team that will consist of the police, municipal court, finance, HR, and the city of DeSoto. And what the transition team will do is discuss all the ins and outs of actually moving forward with this agreement so that the services will begin October 1 with the city of DeSoto. Next slide. And Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Chief Brown, one question I have concerns the mitigation of liability. You did mention it on one of the bullets, and there's there's a financial liability that we avoid, but could you elaborate just a bit more on what liabilities would not that our police force would be relieved of in terms of your personal opinion?
Absolutely. Anytime a law enforcement agency arrests someone, that agency is now responsible for the care of that individual. And so if we were to arrest someone and that person is injured in our facility, or that person commits suicide, the city of Duncanville would have some potential liability for those incidents.
And I know that sometimes the individuals that are arrested are inebriated, sometimes they're on drugs, sometimes they can be quite combative. How do you see that our police force then is this is more advantageous in taking some of that liability away from our forces?
Those are great questions, Mayor, and you're absolutely correct. There are times when we arrest individuals who are intoxicated, and we have a specific cell that we place that individual in. We also have policies in place that require that we monitor that individual or those individuals on a regular basis. But just to use someone who is intoxicated, for example, that doesn't mean that that person could possibly fall, injure themselves between those times that we are checking on that individual. So you're absolutely correct. Those are situations that the city of Duncanville would no longer have to concern itself with if we no longer have arrestees in our building.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from any council members? Mr. Cooks, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Chief, thank you very much for the presentation. Would you share any learnings that you received from the other cities that's currently using DeSoto's jail facilities, and any learnings that you have from them on the good side, and of course, any challenges that they had as well?
Yes, sir. Myself and Assistant Chief Mark Lavigny, we had a very positive meeting with Chief Costa and his staff. We were able to walk through their facilities. It's a very professional organization, in my opinion. It's a accredited organization. We have zero concerns in how the city of DeSoto operates their jail facility. The other best Southwest cities have partnered with the city of DeSoto for several years, and I am not aware of any issues raised by those other cities. And so we feel confident that if the council approves this agreement this evening, it'll be a good partnerships between the cities.
Thank you. You mentioned this before, but for the sake of being on the agenda tonight, would you again share with us any items that will get the officer back on the street as quick as possible after an arrest is made of an individual? How will this ensure to get that officer back on the street again to patrol our city?
Yes. So basically what will happen is when the officer arrives at the facility, that officer will actually turn that prisoner over to detention staff for the city of DeSoto. And so the officer will be able to get back in his or her vehicle, return to the city of Duncanville.
Okay. And then the staffing gain or loss, would you talk about the staffing gain or loss one more time? Are we losing, how many loss of staff are we having because of this?
Yes, part of the agreement, the city of DeSoto has agreed to onboard 4 of our employees. Those employees have applied, and I'm not certain of what the outcome is at this point, but there's a process, there's a hiring process that those employees would have to go through. And the city of DeSoto obviously would make the decision whether those employees meet their hiring standards and go from there.
And if they don't meet them, are they just
yes, sir. If they don't meet the city of DeSoto hiring standards, they will not be hired.
Okay. All right, that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Jameson, I see your hand up.
Yes. So you're saying Cedar Hill, Duncanville, DeSoto, Lancaster, Glen Heights. That's 5 cities are going into one jail. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, it's more than that. There will be 4 partner cities because those are the larger police departments that have similar number of arrests. The smaller agencies are school district and small municipalities that does not have the same number of arrests or similar arrests that the 4 partner cities will have.
And we're all contributing money to DeSoto to build this huge facility, correct?
Well, there will be a cost associated, yes, ma'am, with using their facility.
The facility exists today.
I understand that.
Okay.
I'm saying, okay, but we're all contributing money, so obviously they'll be able to upgrade it and make it even nicer and grander than it is. And if we decided in the future that we didn't like the setup and we wanted to go back to our jail, we would no longer have one, correct?
Well, I can't speak to whether their facility is going to be upgraded or expanded. Chief Costa is actually have joined the meeting, and DeSoto would have to answer those questions. But I don't anticipate us having to come back. As I indicated, there are other Best Southwest cities that's been a part of this agreement for quite some time. As I indicated, it's a professional ran organization. I am not aware of any problems that exist, but should we have to come back, we would have to reestablish our holding facility.
Well, and I understand you don't know of any problems and that it's a professional group, but that sort of thing happens. That's why we're separate cities. We could all have the same mayor, the same council, the same everything, but we're separate cities. So it kind of concerns me that particularly when there's all these cities going into one jail facility, we're taking away the options for the cities to operate and autonomously and all going to one facility. And as I'm not questioning, is it professional? I'm not questioning whether they're going to have a great jail set up because they're getting paid. They're getting money from all of these cities, and we just outsourced our jail system. So, I guess one could say that maybe the police department, because a portion of their jobs now they're not doing, they won't have to do. So either we don't need as many or they don't need to make as much money. That's when you take that out. I don't want to do that. I'm just saying that this concerns me. It bothers me to give away a part of our system here and pay another city to take it over. And then it bothers me even more when I find out there's more cities that are going into this one facility. We really have lost our...
Can Chief Costa speak to the efficiency that I think that we're going to gain by joining the new jail? And also too, again,
You're missing my point. It's not the efficiency. It's not saving $95,000. It's that.
It's not.
Every city going back to the olden days had their jail, and we're giving it up, and it bothers me. And especially when I hear of all the cities that are doing it. Is Richardson, Plano, Garland, are they all going together for one jail? I'm just curious. Is there anybody else doing this?
Well, Ms. Jamison, if I may, let me maybe relieve some of your concerns by sharing this. the cities also share a dispatch center, and the cities also share a Tri-City animal shelter.
Right.
And those partnerships have worked extremely well for our cities. They are efficiently ran, and the cities save money. And at the end of the day, this is a business decision. What we're looking to do is utilize tax dollars as best as we can. And so if we can transition our detention services to DeSoto, and we can save our taxpayers money, and our officers are not jailers. Our officers are still going to make arrests. They're simply taking the arrestees to a different location. It's the public service officers, those jailers, those individuals who are tasked with the jail functions, those individuals will be transferring, if you will, over to the city of DeSoto. And so this is a practice that, quite frankly, is becoming fairly standard for small police departments. There are a number of police departments that are in the northern portion of the Metroplex that also utilize.
Which ones?
There's Capel, Farmers Branch, Addison.
They're all together?
Yes, ma'am.
So Capel, Addison, and Farmers Branch all use the same jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Who got it?
I can't recall which one of the cities actually housed the prisoners. I would have to research that, but I can tell you that they also practice a regional jail.
I'd like to call on Chief Costa to answer some of Councilmember Jameson's concerns. I think some of it could be autonomy, and some of it could be the ability to actually hold X number of prisoners. Do you have the space? So Chief Costa, we're looking forward to hearing your perspective on this, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. So we are not the only ones that do this. There are some other regional jails, and Chief Brown mentioned one. Mansfield has a regional type jail where they take in federal prisoners along with other smaller agencies, arrestees as well. So the city of DeSoto, we have a 55 total person jail that we can hold up to 55 people. However, we don't even get close to that figure any longer. We have a process where we bring those arrestees in. We book them in, we process them as quick as we can, and we get them magistrated as quick as we can so that they can get back out on the street, and that the liability is lessened, as well as the fact that we only have probably about an average of 12 to 15 people total in a 24-hour period that may be in the jail at one time. Lately, due to COVID, we've been probably between 4 and 6 people, and some nights as low as 1 or 2. But our process is such that when the officers come in and they drop their arrestee in the Sally Port, we take them. Right now we have a standalone thermometer where we take their temperature, we provide them with a mask if the officers don't have one. They come in and they are processed with all their information and their property, and then they are put into a holding cell. The paperwork is all processed once the reports are done by the officers, and the officers get back on the street a lot quicker. Our other agencies that we partner with all speak very highly of our system and the fact that we are able to process each arrestee as well as we can. We screen them for any type of injuries or anything that may preclude them from being transferred to Dallas County. If so, that they are charged with crimes that they need to be held over to Dallas County. We have an agreement with Dallas County where they will come and pick up a group of arrestees, or if anyone are available, for 3 times a week. And we also have our own transport van where we transport those arrestees that need to go to Dallas County 4 times a week, and under any other special circumstances. So the system, I believe, works flawless. We have a bond clerk during the day. We're working with the judge to try to get another bond clerk so that we can process these arrestees a lot quicker. And I believe that we have a real good system, and we don't think that we would be bogged down or lagged in any way with taking on Duncanville's arrestees.
Thank you, Chief. Another one of the concerns that Ms. Jameson mentioned was the possibility of future upgrades to the facility. Do you have any perspective to offer on the currency of the facility in terms of its ability to meet future needs?
So as I said, we can hold up to 55 prisoners at this point in time. We don't see the need to expand. I've been a chief for 8 years. We had at that time, we were probably an average of about 30 prisoners. And since we invoked this new process, for the last 5 years, those numbers have dwindled because of the fact that we process them in a much more faster and efficient way. But there are no plans to expand the jail. If anything, we upgrade the interior, we keep it clean, and we maintain and manage all the working parts of that jail as well as the staff.
Okay, Ms. Jameson, yes.
Chief Brown, you know that you're one of my favorite people ever, so don't take this wrong. But being able to Google things is pretty good. Addison only has 16,000 people, 85% is commercial, and their jail is Carrollton, which you can understand because Carrollton's huge. But Farmers Branch has their own jail, and they're saying they have a modern jail facility, very upgraded, lovely. And they have 40,000, which is like us. And Coppell has their own jail too. So I feel real concerned about giving away something. I understand why Addison did. Addison's tiny, 16,000 people, and the majority of it is commercial. They only have 15% of their sales taxes or their taxes are residents. The rest is commercial. But this bothers me to give this away. This is our city, and this is a part of having a city, is having a jail. And it's an expensive endeavor to go, oh, you know what, we don't really like this after we've gone into it and we're funding DeSoto's jail. And I don't think that, and I do want to give you more space, and I think that we have more space available. Seagoville has their own jail, and Seagoville's smaller. Are you giving it up, Patrick?
Mr. Harvey, I see your hand. Would you like to comment, please? Mr. Harvey, you're muted. Please unmute.
May I say something real fast? Just one correction. The city of Coppell actually uses Carrollton's jail.
They don't say that online.
They do. I just wanted to correct that.
Okay, we have the fact. Thank you, Ms. Piercy. Mr. Harvey, you had your hand up to speak.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Seems as though I recall a little early in our meeting that the fire chief received an award for regional cooperation. I think it was, if I heard and understood you correctly.
Correct.
And so when a city looks at rendering services, granted, it used to be that one size fit all, but now city government is facing so much more expectations from its populace as to the range of services that they expect. And so in order for cities to meet that challenge, there are different ways that you can do it. a very accepted way in municipal practice of having a service is to pool together with other cities to offer that service. So, I understand about autonomy, and I believe in autonomy. However, for us to be able to order this, in order for us to be able to serve the citizens in the manner that they expect and require, sometimes we have to think outside the box. And cooperation is the way to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yes. I just looked at Coppell.
Mr. McBurnett has not
Oh, okay.
spoken on it yet, so I'd like to turn it over to Mr. McBurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I think this is a win-win-win situation across the board. It makes sense. We can allocate resources as needed, and I think it's a good deal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments besides Ms. Jamison that haven't spoken yet? I see Mr. Evans, Mr. Brett Evans from the city of DeSoto. You'd like to give some input, please?
He's gonna let, oh, no, you can just take a shot.
You're muted, Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, you're still muted.
Tracy, can you
Can you
please
hear me
try?
now?
There you are.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to let you know that North Richland Hills also has a Tri-City facility as well.
And with whom are they doing their partnerships?
That I'm not sure. They reached out to me long ago to get some information about our jail. And so I think they're starting a Tri-Cities facility as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cooks?
Just one question to Richard or to the chief. Is there any revenue we receive by having a jail? Or is it just expense?
No, it's only expense. There's no revenue associated with it. Probably Chief Brown alluded to liability, and so again, that's one of the costs that we would not incur any longer. Is our we do pay liability. It goes in factors into our liability insurance. And I've asked TML to give me an estimate of what that portion is, and they have not been able to give me an answer so far. So I don't know exactly what that cost is, but there is a cost.
Okay, I read my call, so I think I'm understanding you're saying there is no jails or no revenue-driven item for the city, whether it's from tickets, whether it's from grants. There's no way we get. Is there anything we get any revenue from having a jail? I think you're saying yes or no.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
Motion.
Okay, Mr. McBurnett made a motion to approve. I see Mr. Vera Cruz is seconding the motion. City Secretary, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Vera Cruz, for or against?
For.
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett, for or against?
For.
Anderson, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Cooks, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Jamison, for or against?
Against.
At-large Councilmember Harvey, for or against?
For.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
For. Thank you. By a vote of 6-1, the motion is approved. Thank you, council. Moving on to item number C, taking any necessary action as a result of executive session. There is no action to take as a result of executive session. Moving on to item number 6, we have been provided the PowerPoint and the information from the library from the quarterly report. Are there any questions relating to that report? Okay, seeing none, we accept that quarterly report for the library. Thank you to Julio and his staff for all that they're doing, and the summer reading program, taking care of our kids, taking care of our senior citizens, delivering books, and making our library a focal point for our community for education and the arts and sciences as well. So thank you very much, City Council. With that, are we adjourned at 9:19? Have a good evening.